Hi there and welcome back. In this video I want to show you something I've been playing with lately, which has to do with OpenAI's artificial intelligence services. This is of course what everybody's been playing with these days. ChatGPT comes to mind. Anyways, we're going to do this in SketchUp and I'll show you some interesting things you can do in just a minute. Don't forget to check out my book Architectural Design with SketchUp. It covers all of these topics and makes for a great desk reference. You can find it where books are sold. There's also a link to it on my site sketchupfordesign.com, together with lots of additional tutorials and news. Okay, let's get started with this. So as a first step, I'm just going to start the extension right here. It's called OpenAI Explorer. It's an experimental extension, and I'll show you in a minute why that is. But we're just going to ask the OpenAI service something, and I want it to draw a 2-inch box right here in SketchUp. Now I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to get the console with a prompt, and look at that, a box appeared. All right. So if you've done any experimenting with ChatGPT, for example, or OpenAI's API, you know that it can generate actually fairly good code, I want to say. This is in quotes. Sometimes it generates total garbage. But for the most part, actually, it's actually pretty well-formed code. And as it turns out, the SketchUp Ruby API is accessible this way. So what we can do is what you're seeing here, where we can use natural language to ask it to do something. And then what it does is it sends back code that, you know, within the SketchUp API does exactly that. And I've posted this on my blog a few days ago, so you can easily find the article there, where you can see, this is on sketchupfordesign.com, by the way, where you can see that, you know, pretty well-formed code can be generated using just a few lines. So they're actually spelled out down here. What we're doing is we query the OpenAI API that's available. You of course need to have an account with those guys, and so then you need to add your API key here. And then we're going to ask it to do something in Ruby, and there's a simple request that we're executing with the API service, and then whatever comes back is the generated code, which gets exported or shown basically in the Ruby console. But then this last, you know, the fingers crossed line here basically runs that code within SketchUp. So sometimes that works really well, sometimes that does not work very well, and will trip up errors, and I'll show you in a second what can happen. But there's a bunch of things you can do, and I'll show you that in SketchUp just really quick. So one was, of course, you know, my instructions to draw a box. And as it turns out, actually, it drew this box quite well. So for one here, it grouped it. So if you look through the code that's here on the right, it you know, takes the active model, of course, and does even an undo operation. This is something that I didn't even ask it to do, so that's quite nice. Anyways, and then it creates a group, adds a face, pulls the face. You know, this is how I would have drawn that box anyways, and then closes the undo group, so that if I didn't want this, I can actually just do Control-Z and undo this thing. So in terms of code, this is pretty workable. There's some other stuff that works well, and I'll show you how you can get to this dialog here easier. But for now, we'll just use it. So another thing that works really well is, you know, random stuff. So draw 20 random lines. Let's see if it actually does it. I have to zoom out a little bit. There you go. 20 random lines. Why we need it, I don't know. You can do draw 5. That's not correct. 5 concentric circles. And there they are, right there. So there are some things that work really well. There's other stuff that doesn't work well, and I've found, you know, simple instructions work better than complex instructions. Let me show you something else that works well, and then most probably at some point we will run into something that gets tripped up. So I'm just going to delete this line here, but you can actually manipulate what you have in your model. So I can highlight all of these, and I can say, color these selected objects in 5 blue tones. Let's see if it does that. I think I forgot the word random in there. Yeah, this doesn't do much. So I'm going to color the selected objects randomly. Ta-da! That's pretty good, right? So it's interesting, you know, when you look through the code here too. If you're into Ruby, then you may want to do that. Of course, if you're not into Ruby, you can actually just ignore the code and just try your best at this. But it does find interesting solutions for the questions you're asking. So I mean, in this case here, it basically generates 5 random blue tones. You can actually ask more general things too. So in 5 pastel tones, and it should work. There you go. So it's really interesting how you can just use language to now do things. Another one that I found to work is randomly scale the selected objects in the Z direction. Let's see if it works this time. Yeah, that may have been very little. Let's see if we can approximately twice. I don't know. So I'm trying to give it some kind of a maximum. No, that didn't work. So this would be an example now where it doesn't work. So in terms of the prompts you ask and the result you get, what I found is it basically there's a certain logic behind it. So one thing that we are coming across right here is that it actually completed my prompt, which is it's an interesting error, because you'll see here that it added twice their original size as a suggestion to complete the prompt, and then of course it gives me the code for that. And because it added this last little bit here into the result, that of course tripped Ruby up. So if I now go back and add that little bit to the end, twice their original size, there you go. Now it does it. So it not just generated code, it actually corrected my language too. So kind of interesting, this whole thing, right? So you see, there's some things that work very well with this, other things that don't. One thing that I found, and you saw it on my website most probably, that doesn't work is draw a house. When I do that, I believe, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that doesn't work here. So you'll see we got this far. So some things work, some things don't. Simple instructions like single instructions work very well. You can kind of chain instructions. This is an interesting bit where you can say draw a what we're going to do, 12 by 24 rectangle. And you can go step by step, basically. So there's one thing. There you go. This is the other interesting thing. Every once in a while, it actually just throws in a random, a confirmation, which is nice, I suppose. So now I can go here and highlight the rectangle, and then my next instruction would be extrude the face by, I don't know, something. Oops. Okay, so that did not work. Now we can kind of see on the right. Okay, that didn't work. I can try to be more SketchUp specific. Push, pull. Oh, the face, the selected face. Okay, so this. Oh, no, okay, it worked. It's a little interesting to learn basically how this thing thinks. So anyway, so now I've got this. Now I can highlight all of those, and I can say A, group the selection. Let's see. No, that of course did not work. Group all objects in the selection. Also didn't work. All right. Okay. Back to my original point that some things work, some things don't. And I found that basically sometimes you just need to kind of massage the language a little bit and give it some more specifics one way or another. Actually, I had success at some point where I said, draw a grouped 2x4. Let's see if this does it. And then the other effect that you may be running in with this, and it seems like we're having that right now, is this, of course, uses OpenAI's API service, which tends to get overloaded these days. And besides, I do have the free plan, so it doesn't give me any kind of priority. So when you notice that nothing is coming back, then you just have to wait for a minute until the request times out and just try it again. I don't have an elegant way to cancel this right now, so I'll just pause the video and we'll be back in a second. And there's the error right here. Let's read timeout. Okay, let's try again. Click on OK. Well, it's a start. I didn't specify the length. There you go. It's basically a cutoff in that case. Although it's interesting right now. Here it give me the actual dimensions, and I had it in the past where, well, maybe let me try a different way. Draw a grouped. Oh no, wait. Let's do 8 foot long, 2x4. Then the context makes more sense. where it basically, nope, that's not a 2x4. Interesting. All right. I had it in the past where it actually interpreted the 2x4 context properly. Basically, assigned the size of 1.5 by 3.5, and then extruded everything by 8 feet. So, hence the experimental nature of this. If you've done anything with the service, you find that, of course, it gets somewhat creative. Some things work well, some things don't. The other aspect here is at this point, it's using their version 3. Supposedly version 4 is better. And then when you switch to version 4, give it a try again, see if that improves things. But I find, some things actually work pretty well. All right, so let me quickly show you how the extension works, where I basically packaged this code and made it a little extension so that you can try it out for yourself, even without being into Ruby code. You can download it from my website and hopefully soon from the extension warehouse. It's called OpenAI Explorer right here. And it does have two windows. One is the Explorer and one is the settings. So let's click on settings for a second. And this would be the first thing you want to do. You want to basically go into settings before anything else, because you're going to have to add your API key right here. So mine is right here, and you can regenerate that if you leave it in a public video like this, for example. But you have to get the API key first, and you do that on the OpenAI website. It's linked from my blog post, of course, and you can find it, just basically through their AI platform subsite. And you first sign up, of course, and then you create yourself a new secret key, and then you copy that and you paste it right into this settings dialog right here. All right, so now you've got yourself your API key in here, which lets you use everything. The other settings here, one important one is, of course, the model, and you have to put in whatever works with the current version of their API. I found this Text DaVinci 3 works really well. That's version 3. I'm really curious to experiment with version 4 at some point soon, but that's what that is. And then this token thing has to do with the length of the response, and ultimately with how much you will have to pay for their service, because they charge by tokens. And then, of course, shorter gives you short responses, but may not capture the entire code that lets you do something. So if something's a one-liner, then that's a really easy and cheap answer, of course. But if it's longer than that, then you want to have a minimum length here, and or a maximum length at least. And so whatever you put in here is going to be a maximum length for these tokens. It'll cut off the response after that. Temperature is an interesting parameter. If it's 0, it will always generate the same answer. It's somewhat deterministic at that point. If you increase that, you get creative answers, which might mean, of course, that it makes no sense at all what comes back. So for code, typically leave it at 0, 0.1, maybe 0.2 or something like this if you want to have some variation in it, but not typically higher, but feel free to experiment with that, obviously. And then the first and the last options here, this little prefix. This is prefix. This is actually the bit of text that gets sent, as you saw in the console over here, before any kind of request, and that tells the AI to generate code. So that's great, of course, that it does it. But sometimes you don't want that, and sometimes you may want to just ask a question, and I'll just switch over to that mode right now where there's none here, so it won't say use SketchUp Ruby. And then at that point, it's not code that comes back, so you most probably will not want to execute code as well. So the first and the last, they kind of work together, although sometimes you may just want to look at code and not execute it anyways. But in any case, so this would be the other way to use the whole thing. Prompt prefix none. Execute code no, click on OK, and then of course you can do your chat approach, and you can ask things like tell me a joke, and then it will tell you a joke. And you can ask give me tagline for my new SketchUp business. And then, of course, well, that's a kind of boring one. But in any case, so this might be a good case where the temperature number should go up. But like I said, if you want to draw something in SketchUp, of course, then that particular setting is not of any use. So for drawing something in SketchUp, make sure it says use SketchUp Ruby, and yes, and then we're good right here. And then you can go ahead and have some fun with all of this. Find something new that it does, Let me know. I'm really curious what it's actually gonna, let us do, in other words, and how far we can push it. And then if this becomes useful, or if this proves to be useful, then I'll come up with a little better user interface than what I have right now. But having this as, this little dialogue lets you assign a keyboard shortcut to it and quickly enter a request in there and then just execute it. All right, I hope this was useful. Hope you're having fun with this. Play with it. Let me know what comes from it. And I'll see you all soon.